And success is not only financial. Success is satisfaction in the work they're doing, satisfaction in the clients that we're working with, that they're satisfied working with us, satisfaction in the results that are coming out of things. So if we feel a sense of purpose and satisfaction, that for me is what success looks like now.
Hello, and welcome to Keybard. I am Tembi, your host, and today I'll be joined by Warren Wilansky. Warren is the president and founder of Plank, a digital agency that spent more than 25 years creating impactful and meaningful websites. I'm talking with Warren today because of his passion for ethical web design and the way that he uses storytelling to create exciting, dynamic digital experiences. Warren and his team prioritize inclusion, privacy, and sustainability, all with the goal of making the internet a better place for everyone. And don't we all need that? Come on, let's get into it. Welcome, Warren Wilansky. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. I'm so glad that you're joining me today.
Happy to be here. Got a bit of a cold, so if I'm a little bit stuffed up, I apologize to anybody listening to this.
It's all good. We'll FedEx you some cold medicine right away.
Got it.
All right, let's jump in. So you have been working in digital design for over 25 years. But what we want to know is, what was your journey to this field? What led you to it?
So that's an interesting one. As a teenager, I was in bands playing music, and I always considered myself more of a creative person. And then I went into a program called Communication Studies at a university locally called Concordia. And from there, I was aiming to get into the music industry. I wanted to become a producer of some kind. And we did other classes around television and film. But they had a few years earlier started a program called multimedia. There was a track for doing multimedia, which at that time was CD-ROM design, some graphic design. And interestingly, I had had a computer since I was, in the mid 80s, I bought my first computer. But I always saw computers as more of a hobby type thing. In other words, it's something that I would play with. I'd program some small things. I would play around with it. And then suddenly I was encountered with this opportunity where computers had gotten to the point where, from a design perspective, it was now a tool that I could actually use as a creative outlet. So it basically was me merging my interest in technology in with my interest in design. And I just fell in love with it completely. And I then got so excited when I was using the internet and I encountered the first web browser. And I just understood immediately, like, oh, this is going to be powerful. This is going to be interesting. And it went from it not being that creative of an outlet with the first web browsers. And just over time, it's evolved into what it is now. And it's just been a great path to be working with that technology and having seen the internet evolve into what it is today.
What an incredible journey. A lot of times people will try to separate the ideas of technology and creativity from one another as if they should be compartmentalized, even in the way that they're taught sometimes. So I love how those things came together for you and how they often do come together in the work.
And they definitely do in our work. I mean, our team, some people lean a little bit more technical. Some people lean more design. I'm driven by the creative side of things. I'm driven by that. But even the people who are more technology driven, there's creativity in that as well. There's creativity in code. There's creativity in design. There's creativity in marketing. There's creativity in any kind of human expression. So it's really, really a nice tool. And I look at it from that perspective of it being about expression.
So you say that you grew up and you were interested in music, which I love. I love that there was an artistic lead into this. How did your environment overall as a child prepare you or influence you to end up in technology, even with the music piece coming in?
I mean, I think it was that by starting to play music, I basically built into my life an interest in creativity. And then I just saw that opportunity to use technology in a creative way. And it was the merging of the two sides, the technology and creativity. And in some ways, that's probably why the company that I founded ends up being very much a hybrid. In other words, some people focus more on design, some people focus more on technology, whereas I enjoy that we're a hybrid of both.
So what keeps you in the field? I mean, you've been doing this for a long time and technology evolves so quickly. I know how you started, but how do you continue to find fulfillment in the work?
I think I've been lucky in that as I've been doing this for 25 years, every few years my job changes. In other words, what I was doing 25 years ago is not what I'm doing today. 25 years ago, when we were a team of 3 people, when we started out, we were doing all a little bit of everything. And now we're a team of almost 30. So we can all specialize in very different areas. I went from starting off as a designer, and eventually that evolved into becoming more of a project manager. And then that evolved into a point at which somebody had to actually lead the company and set the direction. So that's what I'm doing now more than anything. And I actually see the company in itself as a creative object to kind of, almost take care of and nurture and look at from a creative perspective itself.
So now as a leader, how do you see yourself engaging with your team from the creative perspective? You talked about sort of becoming a project manager, but as a leader of so many people, what kind of skills do you have to bring to bear for that?
I mean, every leader is different. So my approach might not work for somebody else. My approach is to see the team as needing me to support them. In other words, some leaders might believe in challenging or inserting their point of view into things, whereas I feel like I want to get out of the way, let the team do great work, and I support that work. If I need to be involved with a client and they need to, they're demonstrating the work, I'm there to support that work and help the team get that work across rather than be an impediment or a hindrance to it.
So on this journey, what is a decision that you've made in your business that you're proud of? Something that ended up being pivotal to your success?
I would say usually it's when something unexpected happens. In other words, it's, a company as it exists for a long time, even if it is a creative agency, it kind of meanders forward. And I don't mean meander in a negative way, but it's just every day things evolve slightly and everything just kind of builds on itself. And then every so often, something happens. You get a project that is just surprising and like, how did we get that? That's going to challenge us in a new way that we haven't been challenged before. Or there have been times, and it usually happens, but every 5 years, we're not really big on you know, kind of, what I would call almost sales. In other words, a lot of companies are going out and selling and trying to find new people. Like, I think more of like a more traditional product. Let's say you take something like Coke. They're trying to constantly get people to be buying their drinks. In our case, we only need a few new clients every year. And, we only need a few because we work on some sizable projects. So when there are times where I reach out to try to work with somebody, it's usually because I have a personal passion for it, or somebody on our team has a personal passion. So, give you an example, about 10 years ago, I went to the classic rock band named Rush. I went to their website, and their website wasn't in great shape. And I just sent along an email, and it was honest. It was upfront. I wasn't trying to sell them anything. Well, I was trying to get to work with them, but I just sent over an email and I was like, I think we could do much better work. And then the person who got back in touch with me, one of their managers, basically said, we wouldn't have normally answered just somebody answering an email out of anywhere, but I actually went to your site. I took a look at your work and your work's fantastic. So, it's just an example of if you want to do something, you've got to kind of ask for it. And we don't ask all that often, but when we do ask, we do it with meaningful reasons.
I think that's great. And the fact that even as the leader of the organization, the company rather, you made that decision to reach out. You didn't say, hey, assistant, hey, intern, hey, worker, reach out. I'll reach out. So that really says a lot about who you are as a leader.
I think another thing you said there is something that's really, really important to me too, which is when I discuss the people that work at Plank, I refer to them as teammates, not employees or workers. We're all in this together. I see at a company, I have my role, and my role is not more important than others. It's just I have a certain seat, and me being in the seat lets other people do their things, and the other people doing their things lets me do my thing.
Okay, so now you're sounding like you practice servant leadership.
Okay.
That's what I feel. There's a guy, what is his name? Robert Greenleaf, I think. He has this concept called servant leadership. And he talks about how a servant leader typically knows how to do what the team is doing, but doesn't need to do it at that moment and leads next to them side by side, as opposed to stepping in front of them and saying, okay, follow me, just do what I do or do as I say, but really, empowering teammates, as you call them, to be their best in the company. It sounds like that's what you do.
I've never heard that term before, but it kind of does sound
Is
about
it
right.
resonating?
It sounds about right. It's a,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
it's a great observation because I would agree with you on that. In other words, at most, let's say at the beginning of the year, we might have a discussion about setting a direction. So I'll set a general direction, be like, all right, here are the three themes I want you to keep in mind for this year, and we should strive towards that. So I might set a direction, but after that, I will let the team decide on how they want to get there.
That's so important. In leadership, people will often think that it's something just kind of inherent and you just have to figure it out because they may find themselves put in a leadership position. But it sounds like you've really done the work to understand how people perform best and how they get the most fulfillment out of their work when they're led in this style. So that's really admirable. Probably has a lot to do with why you've been around for so long.
Maybe it's just also it fits me, and I'm going to say what I'm saying right now, but I've obviously made mistakes along the way. Everybody does. There have been times where I didn't live up to who I'm trying to be as a leader or as a person. We all fumble at times, but I think I try to do these things because it's who I am. It makes me comfortable, and I hope and I think it makes other people comfortable as well.
That's beautiful. Ethical web design. What is ethical web design and why should artists and cultural organizations pursue that?
So, the word ethics is always a big one. And when I first started thinking about this framework, the idea of using the word ethics kind of scared me at first because I felt like it was going to be very judgmental. And then I realized it's not judgmental. It's more stating these are our ethics. These are the things that matter to us. And our ethics might be different from somebody else's. And we're not judging somebody else's point of view on the world, but we have ours. And ours is making sure that we build websites that are not just aesthetically pleasing and not just easy to navigate, but that they're also accessible, that they take into account people's privacy, they're secure, they're optimized for best practices so that it's a modern website using the most modern technology. And we also take into account environmental impact. And we want to create websites that have the lowest environmental impact. People may not think about it, but when you load a website, there's a computer talking to another computer, and that is taking up energy. And if you happen to have a very, very, let's say, popular website that has a lot of traffic, there's an actual environmental impact to loading that website.
And so because of these ethics, because of your sort of ethos that guides what you all do, you created the Ethical Web Collective.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So the Ethical Web Collective is something we're striving towards. And the idea being we would love for other companies to kind of join us on this journey. If somebody wants to join us on the journey and wants to help us work on making these standards even more widely available, I think that would be great. And that's something we're trying to do with other organizations. But I'll come back to the question you asked me, like, why should this matter to cultural organizations? I think it matters because, somebody could live up to these values. And these values seem to make sense probably for most cultural organizations or nonprofits. But the other thing is they actually make sense from a business perspective. If, let's say, hypothetically, you are serving more of your audience, that's using accessibility to make sure that more people can use the site. If you're taking care of the privacy of the people that are coming to your theater or buying a ticket, that's to their benefit and to your benefit. You're being a better, citizen and organization for those people. If you are taking into account to optimize a website so that there's a lower environmental impact, that means you're probably loading that website quicker on somebody's mobile phone. So you're giving them a better experience. So all of these things, they might be wrapped in that word ethics, but I think they're just better business practices in general.
That makes sense. And so you're based in Montreal.
I am.
Yes, but you have international clientele, including, I might say, Ford's Theater in Washington, D.C., which I
Which
have a very special connection to. Go ahead. You were going to say?
Oh no, I was going to say. I remember we spoke about it when we were chatting before we did this
Yeah.
podcast, and we were trying to do the numbers to see if we crossed over because we've been working with Ford's Theater about 2 or 3 years now, and I think so we didn't actually cross over at the same time.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more of an OG at Ford's. I spent some time there as a teaching artist on their education team, and years prior to that, I was actually the executive assistant to Paul Tatro, the leader of the organization, for a few
Oh,
years.
wow.
So yeah, so Ford's is very near and dear to me in so many ways, and just as a theater practitioner. So I was really thrilled to know that you had had a relationship with them. But I think a part of what is important about that is that you work with an organization that's a museum, a historic site, and a working theater. And so those different components, as well as a significant online archive of important historical elements. And so, that's a really complicated build and that's a complicated relationship. So it's interesting how you all are able to manage all those things. And I wonder, what does it require for you to be able to help an organization conceive and manage so many different components of their existence out in the world?
Yeah, you clearly know Fords very well because, like, you just described the unique challenge of them. They are all those things at once. They're a historic site, they're a museum, they're a theater, they're a working theater. They have the need online to kind of, you know, educate people because people come from all over the country to go to Ford's Theater. I know that even visiting the site myself, there was always students around. There were buses from all over the country coming to the theater to experience it. But the most important thing for us is, like, a website has to sell tickets, it has to give information about all the performances that are happening, all the ways that you can interact. But for me, a lot of it too is a website should be either a place to go to follow up after you've visited a place to go before you visit it so you get to understand. But there are also a lot of people who might never make it to Ford's Theater for financial reasons, for just, inability to access it, to travel. So the website has to almost be an experience onto itself that lets somebody have their experience with Ford's Theater if they never even make it to the site itself.
That's such a really good point. So many people, for whatever reason, are never going to go there, but to give them an experience that's as close as you can get to actually being there physically is really, really special. So it's exciting that you're able to do that. So, like we said, you're based in Montreal. On the local level, though, how do the arts and tech cultures there in Montreal influence your perspective on digital storytelling and design?
So being in Montreal is a unique experience in North America because Montreal is actually a majority francophone French speaking city. So having grown up here, I'm English speaking first. I can speak French. That's my second language. But there's probably an influence there in that we have to know how to tell stories in multiple ways. The way somebody's going to consume it in one language or the other has got to be different. So I think if there's anything that the local Montreal experience that I grew up with is that understanding of how to personalize storytelling, especially online, to the person and the individual itself. So you want to figure out a way so that somebody can kind of explore, interact with things in a way that is comfortable and useful to them. And that for me is something, that we use the terms, it's very web agency to use the terms UI and UX design. What that means is user interface and user experience. So user interface is the design of things. User experience is how somebody flows through a site, how somebody experiences it, how somebody interacts with it. And that's where the storytelling aspect of things comes in.
That's so interesting. People on the international plane outside of Montreal, when they're engaging with websites. So you talk about that you talk about the cultural influence of people in Montreal and how you can use storytelling and how you've practiced storytelling with knowing multiple languages. Do you shift that for international clients? Do you do it differently, or do you find that approach guides you with any design?
It guides us to a point, but I think the most important thing is almost understanding the unique context of each organization. We have certain tools that we use to kind of do our work, but the most important tool is learning. We have to learn. Like when we first started working with Ford's Theater, we had a cursory knowledge of what they were all about. We had to then dig deep and really come to understand them really, really deeply to really be able to represent them properly. And that's really the job more than anything, is the creative side comes after you've finished the deep learning.
That makes a lot of sense. And we've talked about Fords and the way that you support organizations. Your work does support arts organizations and nonprofits and educators, many of whom, tend towards the analog versus the digital because they're in-person experiences, right? So how do you help to help them to feel empowered to build a strong online presence? Like, do some of them even recognize how important that is, or how do you build that for them?
I would say one of the worst things about the pandemic was it was a pandemic. Is one of the best things about it is that people quickly learned that the online experience is a necessary part of what they need to do. Now, of course, there are some people that have gone back to the mentality of I'm back in my building. We just got to get bums and seats. But I think a lot of people have come to understand other things about the relationship online. If it is, like we discussed, educators being able to put up material like Ford's Theater, or different people just understanding that if their collection is available in person, it should be available online as well, so that somebody who, like we discussed before, can't make it into a museum can then at least have an experience. Now, of course, I'm going to be honest. I'm not going to say that an online experience is 100% of what an in-person experience is, but if it's 50 or 60 or 70, that still makes it an important experience. And I think it's one then that we should invest into. And I think organizations generally have come to understand that there's something to invest into there.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you mentioned the pandemic because that was such a transformational time in terms of people understanding the difference between, okay, if you're only analog and nobody can go anywhere, what happens then? And what I saw a lot of artists and cultural organizations try to do is replicate the in-person artistic cultural experience online. And then the conversation started to circle around that. But I think you make such an important point when you talk about the collections being available and getting people close to what the experience is like going to them, because you can't replicate theater or museum experience online. It has to be in person, right? But at the same time, there are other ways to access the knowledge and the experiences that the cultural organization creates. And I think it was an important time for cultural organizations to really think about the differences between those two experiences.
Yeah, I think you hit on something really good there. Really important is, at the beginning of the pandemic, people would just shift and try to let's say sell a ticket or to do a free performance and expect the person watching it on screen to have the same experience. Like, Hamilton on screen is not the same as Hamilton in person.
Absolutely not.
There's no way it could be the same thing. But
Mhm.
if, let's say, there's a companion to Hamilton where somebody could interact with it in a different way that fits the on-screen perspective, that could be very interesting onto itself. But yeah, a performance of Hamilton on Zoom is not the same thing.
No, no. And I'm glad that a lot of organizations realize that there are many ways to help people engage with the ideas behind the work that they do. So you're successful, have a great organization, doing wonderful work. You talk about how you really only need to seek out a few new clients a year because you've got great big projects that you're working on. How do you define success today versus when you began your career? Has that definition changed or has it remained consistent for you?
I mean, I think what drives it probably is roughly consistent. But when we were a smaller team, I mean, I guess we just kind of looked around the room and be like, are we doing all right here? Are we doing okay? Whereas as we've gotten to be a larger team, we have to be a little bit more structured in what we are defining as success. And success is not only financial. Success is financial. It's happiness of everybody around us. In other words, it's a not even happiness. I think I would call it satisfaction. Satisfaction in the work they're doing, satisfaction in the clients that we're working with, that they're satisfied working with us, satisfaction in the results that are coming out of things. So if we feel a sense of purpose and satisfaction, that for me is what success looks like now, rather than maybe when you're working yourself, the work is all that the satisfaction is. When you're working with a team of people, it's the collective that's being invested by everybody together that ends up being probably the measure of success.
That's incredible. I love that. And so would you consider yourself successful on a scale of 1 to 10? Do you feel like you've done what you need to do? You're good to go?
Mm, I'm probably going to be harder on myself than I probably should be, partly because I think if I was totally happy, satisfied, and said, okay, I'm a 10 on 10, then I shouldn't be doing this anymore. I should be doing something else, because that
Ah.
means that means that I've now accomplished what I need to accomplish. So I'll
Hmm.
give myself like a 6.5 or a 7. In other
Okay.
words, I'm satisfied. Things are
Mhm.
great. I'm happy day to day, but we can always be doing better. We can always be striving for something more.
I like that. That's a great approach. So, what upcoming projects are you excited about that you can tell us about?
One that the team is working on right now, which is an interesting one, is a local SPCA organization. In other words, there's a province in Canada that we're working with. And on top of the team being excited to, look at photos of dogs and cats all day long, it's actually a meaningful thing to actually. The SPCA does great work trying to match animals that have their own issues and their own struggles, or lack of compassion from past owners, and trying to match them with somebody who's going to take care of them for the rest of their lives. So that's something that I know the team's working on right now, which they're really digging deeply into.
I love that. That is wonderful. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to share that sparked in your mind?
I just wanted to say that I really enjoyed this conversation. You have great questions. I also appreciate that we have some common work that we've done and been involved with at the same time. So it's refreshing to have this conversation with you.
Oh, thank you, Warren. That's fantastic. I enjoyed it as well. And I'd love to check back in with you down the line and see how things are going and see if we've moved from a 6.5 to maybe an 8. We're a little, I don't know. We'll see what's happening.
That sounds good. I'm up for it.
Awesome. Well, folks, this is Warren Wilansky. It's Tembi. This is KeyBard. Till next time. KeyBard is produced, directed, and hosted by Tembi Duncan. Theme music produced by Psycho Sid. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, follow, leave a review, or give us a 5-star rating. Your support helps the show reach more listeners, and it means the world to me. Thank you for listening.